I've been giving sub-D modeling a super hard time for a long time, but now's the time for sub-D to shine. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly the different solutions that you can use in your hard surface modeling workflow to not only utilize sub-D appropriately to get clean topology, but also how you can utilize the traditional hard surface modeling workflow with subdivision surface modeling. I'd recommend watching this video twice because it's a little bit confusing, but if you watch it twice, it'll make a lot more sense. Let's get started. By the way, you can head over to blenderbros.com/free-guides to pick up some of our free hard surface modeling guides and resources. Let's do some quick retopology exercises. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a sheet. So I'm just going to press Control-3, and then it's going to add in a sub-D with 3 levels. And then all I want to do here is add a little bit more geometry so it's kind of tightened up. And then we'll use proportional editing and kind of create like some sort of sheet or something like that. Something right around here. So now what we need to do is we need to figure out if I want to add in a Boolean and I want to retopologize everything so that way I can run a sub-D afterwards, how exactly do I do that? Well, step one, let's actually remove this sub-D because right now we need to focus on our Boolean. And also if your shading looks crazy, in this case, we're gonna wanna turn off cavity. So now it's a little bit nicer to look at. You could even shade flat for even more, visibility here. So what we need to do, let's say I wanted to create a hole in this particular shape right here. So there's a few different ways to do it. The most obvious and easy solution would be to physically make this geometry here round. So you can do that with something like loop tools and turn that into a circle. And essentially you'll kind of have a hole right here. You can extrude down, you could add in some proximity loops. And then if you run, your sub-D, you're gonna kind of get that result. But what if we want to utilize Booleans? This is where things will get a little bit more complex because we'll have to physically retopologize, but it's not really that big of a deal. In fact, I prefer this method. So what I'm gonna do, if I wanna add in a hole here, what I see a lot of people do as a mistake is they add in a cylinder and they just use a ton of vertices. So if I were to, run a Boolean here just with this and then apply that Boolean, I'm gonna have to connect up so many vertices to get all of this, turned into quads. It just doesn't match. The resolution here really doesn't match the resolution of the actual sheet. Now, perhaps if this sheet was subdivided, say, many more times, then perhaps we could get away with using a higher resolution cylinder. But when it comes to sub-D, there's not really a point having such high density at the beginning because the sub-D is going to add the density anyways, right? So I'll show you what I mean. What we're gonna do is we're gonna keep everything low poly. This is the general workflow you want when you're working with sub-D. You wanna keep everything as low poly as possible. So I don't really need to subdivide this anymore. It'd be a little bit excessive. So I'm just gonna keep this nice and low poly. And likewise, whenever I cut in my hole, I'm gonna keep this low poly as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and scale this up. Now, the way I think about this and the way I'd recommend you think about it as well is you should kind of try to picture where exactly everything's going to connect up before running the Boolean. If you can kind of develop this mindset of picturing things a few steps ahead, it makes things way easier. So for example, before I even run a Boolean on this sheet, before I even do that, I can kind of imagine, this vertex can connect to this one. These 2 vertices right here are going to be very close, so I can merge this one into this one. I can connect this one over to this one. And all I'm doing is slowly creating quads around this thing. So I'm going to keep it right where it is. And just to kind of show you in a more practical sense, I'm going to add that Boolean. We're going to apply it and we'll go into edit mode. And now you can kind of see we have the vertices from that cylinder. And all I need to do now is figure out how can I retopologize this into all quads? So for example, I can merge from here to here. If you have machine tools, you can just press the 1 key. I'm going to merge these near miss vertices as well. This one we're going to actually wait on, I think. And this guy could go here. We're gonna merge this one here because I'm gonna take these two vertices and join those with the J key. Same thing over here, join those. And you can see we're slowly creating a set of quads. See what I mean? And go over here and join that. Now this one was pretty close to the edge, and this is where you might need to either add in additional geometry or kind of slide things around. So what I'm gonna do is perhaps slide this back a bit. And now we have a little bit more space to work with. So I can merge that one here, and then I can merge that one there. So now we kind of have, you know, a much better kind of connected solution. Now, if you didn't want to slide this vertex out of the way, if you wanted to keep that for whatever reason, your best bet in this case would probably be to add some additional geometry and try your best to kind of merge it that way. It's going to be a little bit tricky because you're going to end up, you know, kind of creating some triangles here, and you're going to have to really, you know, get in and try your best to merge it. And it's just overall going to be a little bit more tedious kind of trying to get the result that you want. But, you know, if you wanted to keep that one kind of where it was, you can certainly finesse it a little bit and kind of get the results you were looking for. But generally, you kind of have more freedom with sub D. We're not going for any particular measurements. So in this case, it'd probably be a bit easier to slide that one back so it isn't so close. And then again, we're just going to kind of make sure everything is a nice set of quads. Right, just like that. And then just to kind of space this out a bit nicer, what I would recommend doing is selecting these areas, kind of trying to make it more or less into a circle, kind of around there, as you can see. And then what I would recommend doing is make sure you have loop tools enabled here in the add-ons panel. Turn that on, right click, go to loop tools, and then go to relax. And then press Shift R a few times to repeat that command. And that's going to actually relax the geometry and make it a lot, you know, more spaced out. And same for this one in here. We're going to right click and relax it just like that. We could also try using something like a space, for example. Sometimes that'll help out a little bit. And you could even, you know, rotate this a little bit as well. If you wanted these to kind of line up a little bit nicer, you could just rotate it and you're going to kind of get a result like that. So I'm just going to rotate that a bit more manually, and now we kind of have this result. And already you can see how much more consistent and even this entire object kind of looks. This is a little bit longer than this one, for example, but it's not really a huge deal. You can always fix that if needed. So now at this point, I could extrude this down, right? Maybe down here, and then fill that in. You can get a little bit more specific with that if you wanted to. If you wanted to extrude right along the normal, what I would recommend doing is filling that and then extruding it. So that way you're actually extruding along the normal. Little kind of hack there. So now all we need to do is add in our sub D, give it a few levels. And now you can see we have a lot of control here. So what I can do is I can add in some proximity loops here and maybe out there. If I want to, maybe not out here actually, just on the inside. So I can tighten that up. And then I can tighten up that area as well. And then down here, I can tighten up that area. Nice and clean. And obviously we do have kind of a big, you know, n-gon here in the bottom. If that bothers you, you can always delete this and then run a grid fill. So you would press F3 and then type in grid and then go to grid fill, and it would just do that for you automatically. If you wanted to have a little bit more accurate, you know, topology, it's just a very simple solution right there. Now we do have some poles, and poles are basically 5 edges going into one vertex. So if I go here and turn off wireframe, you're going to kind of see right here, we actually have a pole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Poles aren't a huge issue. It's not something I would, you know, normally stress about, but sometimes they can be a little bit problematic, especially if like this was on a face of a character and it needed to be deformed. It wouldn't deform as nicely as you might want. So, you know, if I were to up this level a little bit, you wouldn't really see a difference if I tried to bend this. So if I added in like a simple deform modifier, you're not going to really have any issues with that pole. But, a good rule of thumb is to try to avoid poles if you can. Like if it's right there in front of you, you might as well fix it. But poles aren't going to actually give you a huge issue most of the time. A pretty easy way to, in this case, if I wanted to kind of get rid of this pole, there's a few different solutions, but I could merge this here and just kind of, make that corner kind of removed there. So now we just have this one vertex, and now 1, 2, 3, 4 going into that. Same idea. Could kind of do that. And I'll just kind of repeat that process. And again, I'm pressing Shift 1 to merge at the center with machine tools, and then 1 to merge it last. And now all of a sudden you can see, yes, it kind of rounded it out, but you can see how much more consistent that topology actually is as a result of that pole being gone. So you can see how nice that looks. But before, if we undo it, before you can kind of see we had a little bit of a spike there due to that pole. So again, not really a huge issue, but something to keep in mind. So pretty fun and easy solution there. Hopefully it's kind of beginning to make sense. And now you really have full control over, how dense you want this thing to actually be. You turn off the cavity. Generally with sub-D, you want to have cavity turned off. It'll cause some weird visual issues. But there you go, nice simple answer. Now I want to briefly show you the hard surface workflow that you would generally use when you're utilizing subdivision surface modeling. I'm going to show you two different approaches because they're very, very important. So let me add in another plane here, just like that. And what I'm going to do is again, just subdivide this twice. And just, I'm going to make a similar thing like I did before. I like these planes, they're easy to work with. And I'm just going to make, something kind of like that. There we go. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to kind of move this around so I can kind of have a more sharp point more or less at the top. Because I'm going to show you something pretty cool here that I think you'll enjoy. So I'm going to do something like that. That looks good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a proximity loop here with Control R, and then another one here with Control R. What this basically does is it takes that sub-D, what we had before, it takes that rounded area and it tightens it together. And that essentially creates a bevel without adding in, a bevel modifier. And this is a perfectly valid solution. This isn't going to cause any issues. You can see all that did was it kind of tightened up the geometry around there and gave us this really nice kind of clean, edge crease right here. Now there's actually another solution that you'll probably see us using a lot in our tutorials, and it doesn't involve proximity loops, it involves edge creases. Now edge creases are extremely valuable because you don't have to add in any extra geometry. So what I can do here, check this out, is I can go in, I can alt click on these edges and press Shift E. I'm going to pull that all the way up. You can also go in here into the end panel and take the main crease and put that all the way up to 1 like that. Generally, you're going to want to have this either at 0 or at 1. I don't really use any in between. And basically what putting this to 1 does is it makes this geometry here perfectly sharp. So the reason we can't see the sharp edge is because we need to actually enable our auto smooth. So now it's going to smooth based off of the angles between the faces. Now this might need to be a little bit lower to catch. And we're going to kind of catch the geometry like that. So now what we have is we have a perfectly sharp edge right here, just like that. So instead of using the proximity loop solution, what we can do at this point is we can actually add in a bevel modifier. And obviously what the bevel modifier is going to do, I'm just going to use a bevel with hard ops. All the bevel modifier is going to do is it's going to bevel based on these sharp edges. And again, we might need to adjust this angle a little bit here as well so it catches everything. And now we have this beautiful bevel right here on the edge, which is a little bit different than the process we used before. So instead of adding in physical proximity loops here, we're adding in a crease, and then we're taking that sharp crease and giving it a nice little bevel right here, which is exactly what we want. You can kind of see how that thing looks. And this is kind of the workflow that you're going to see us using a lot in hard surface modeling. I tend to just use creases with sub-D to get that hard edge, because remember, Hard surface models have those hard defined edges, and that's exactly what I want, and that's what using a crease is going to actually get me. And then after I add in the crease, I can use the bevel to kind of get that nice edge highlight that, I always recommend that you add in. And this is where you can really get fancy with it. At this point, you can kind of mix and match the workflow you want to use. So for example, if I didn't care about retopologizing anything and I just wanted to straight up put a hole into the mesh, as long as my Boolean is going after the sub D has already executed, I could go in here and I could just add in a simple cut because the sub D is not going to be running on the Boolean. The sub D goes first, right? It goes sub D, and then Boolean, and then the bevel over there on that hard edge. And then likewise, if I wanted to move this Boolean up, this is where I'd have to, definitely retopologize a bit and probably use a much lower resolution cylinder. And we'll do this one more time as one additional demonstration. I'm gonna remove this sub D for now. I'm gonna remove the bevel as well. And then we're just gonna add in a cylinder. We'll give this guy, 8 vertices and scale this down. Let me also turn off the cavity, and we're just going to kind of get a nice hole right here in this object, and we're just going to retopologize it again. So let's apply that Boolean. Let's just do some basic retopology like I've already shown you earlier. Should be pretty straightforward. You just have to solve for X, figure out how you can get all these turned into quads, and generally it's a pretty easy process. You might need to move some of this geo over a little bit just to make it, a little bit more even and consistent. But if you do that, you're going to get a much cleaner looking result. We'll kind of slide that in. We could even slide this in a bit, slide that over. We could even, slide this back, or perhaps we could actually join these together. Actually, maybe not. We can slide that up and then kind of slide this over here. So we still have that kind of initial plane we had, and then like I showed you before, we would just go in and then just relax these a little bit with loop tools. Relax is always a useful function. I'd recommend using it when you can. Slide this back a bit. And then again, we'll go into here into the interior and relax this one. This one isn't as clean as I thought. We could try some of these different settings here. Doesn't always work as you might expect, but I'm going to show you another hack. What I could actually do here is fill these edges in with the F key and then go to loop tools and turn this into a circle. That's actually a cool little hack I use a lot. Sometimes it'll mess up and you might need to just do a merge to get that geometry patched up, but there you go. Now it's going to actually give you a proper circle. You can rerun your sub D. You can add in your proximity loops here, or like I said, if you don't want to use proximity loops, all you really need to do, super simple, take the edges that you want to have, hard basically, and you want to press Shift E, pull that all the way up, and now we're going to have these perfectly hard edges here. Same for this area up here that we've already added earlier. And then essentially what I can do is I can add in the bevel modifier and just make sure that bevel is capturing, all those hard edges there. You might need to adjust the angle just a bit until you capture the areas you want. And just like that, you have these really cool results. You can kind of mix and match how you want to run the Boolean, how you want to use the proximity loops, and kind of determine which workflow is best for you. So the point of this video is really show you a few different exercises, show you some different solutions for getting pretty similar results with different strategies, and you're going to see, this is one of the best ways to kind of mix and match a sub D workflow with a traditional hard surface modeling workflow. So I'm just going to use a grid fill on that one, and grid fill gets the job done, and we kind of have a clean mesh here, no real issues. Has all quads, and the best thing about quads, I don't talk about quads a lot, but I've always said quads are amazing if you want to deform your mesh. And the higher that resolution is, the higher I pump this up, you don't want to go too high, but maybe like to 3, I can really start to kind of bend this and get some really cool, results as a result of having quads. It's very, very useful when you need it. So I'd recommend watching this video again because, It's just informative, and if you watch it a second time, it's going to make so much more sense seeing the strategies I just implemented as opposed to watching it, only one time. So hope this information was valuable to you. If you want to find some more hard surface modeling resources, check out our free guides over on blunderbros.com. There's a free guide section up there. We have our hard surface modeling jumpstart course, our 9 secrets training. I'd recommend that one. It's really good. And I think we have a few others like the hard surface ebook if you want to pick up those and dive into some of the free content we have, a lot more in depth than what I have here. So head over to blunderbros.com. Hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, let me know below, and I'll see you in the next video.